Good morning again. Welcome to the webinar on companionable planting. This is, I think, Joan Pont's little play on words on traditional companion planting. And this will be an interesting talk about how plants get together to know each other and help each other grow. Joan is located in Sonoma County and has been active with the California Native Plant Society for a long time and has done several of our webinars related to native plants in particular. And this one branches out a little bit past native plants, obviously. So please use the Q&A. I'll monitor it. Be aware that this will be recorded and will be available to you on Tuesday if you want to go back and review it. The slotegardens.com website has it there, and you can reach it at YouTube if you search for Slote Garden Center. All of our webinars are up on YouTube as well. So without further ado, Joan, tell us about companionable planting.
Well, it is such a beautiful day. You guys can get started right when I finish. I really loved pulling this talk together because there are some foundational changes in this field. And although you can start with tomatoes and marigolds, that is a good start. You can go on to other combinations. And what really was confusing it was my shortcoming that I cannot remember lists. If I read a list of companion planting recommendations and then go out to the garden, I'm going to forget it. If I put it on my phone, I can't see it in the sun. So I asked why? Why are some combinations more helpful than others? And I found some answers. So that's what I'm going to share with you. Because gardening is the best hobby in the world. You can sit under the shade of a tree, eat something delicious you grow, and sequester carbon from carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. So the goals for today are what really works and what is merely tradition and may not actually work. When do some plant combinations help a plant grow healthier, deter diseases and infestations, increase yields, improve soil structure and access to nutrients, and make your edible garden more beautiful while supporting nature in its entirety? Those are my goals. So I'll be done in 2 or 3 days. No, just kidding. There's a nice book I found called Plant Partners, Science-Based Companion Planting Strategies for the Vegetable Garden, which was really helpful and really informative. Let me go back to these two words, diseases and infestations. And I was not clear on the differentiation until I took a year of viticulture at Santa Rosa Junior College. So a plant disease can be similar to human disease. It can be bacterial or viral or fungal. So bacterial, an example would be what pears get, which would be fire blight. That's a bacterial disease. A viral disease can be tobacco mosaic virus. I don't think many people are growing tobacco in the Bay Area, but you are growing tomatoes and they are in the same plant family. So my friend who had a really gorgeous CSA, community supported agriculture with lots of different vegetables, she would encourage people never to smoke on her property because it is documented that the tobacco mosaic virus can infect the tomatoes. And fungal disease is the one that you see most would be powdery mildew. And so those are plant diseases. An infestation is when insects or other invertebrates eat your plants. That's called an infestation. That's what the plant people call it. So diseases and infestation, we're going to actually address both. So new concepts get new names. The old term is companion planting, and it's not in fashion anymore. So that's why I changed the title to companionable planting. And the reason the folks writing horticulture literature want to not use that term is because a lot of those lists were either coincidence or folklore or urban legend or suburban legend. And some of them weren't that helpful. So the new terms are borrowed from regenerative agriculture, polyculture, interplanting, when you have a field of corn, you have something low growing in between, intercropping, and cover cropping. And so I just put them all together and I called it companionable planting. Then you can go outside the plant world and have companions like your sheep doing woolly mowers. So a lot of gardens are now swinging to the wild side with a diversity of native plants and not being that very um, traditional boxwood and lawn all green. So tons of flowers, tons of diversity and native plants. And you don't even have to deadhead because a flower, when it blooms, has a second job to do. Once it's pollinated, it makes seeds that the birds can eat. So that's what I'm saying is going to the wild side. So you can actually incorporate some of these concepts to your vegetable garden. So how to get to companionable planting? So two ways are to learn to love insects and learn a bit of botany and the concept of plant families to diversify your garden. So here is, if you need access to the love of insects, there is a coffee table book called Pheromone, which is artwork of unbelievably beautiful insects. So if you have a bug phobic friend, you might want to consider that for a Christmas present for exposure therapy. So you increase the insects in your garden, it seems really counterintuitive. One generally protects your plants from nibblers, like caterpillars, that eat the leaves, and suckers, which are disgusting, like aphids that have a mouth part that has no chewing apparatus, but has a straw that they can pierce the leaf and suck out the phloem or the sugary fluid. So we want to swing the concept to tolerate, don't eliminate, mainly because elimination never works and all you're doing is adding poisons. So imagine a very, very tiny African Serengeti on your deck or in your backyard. You have many, many, many herbivores or plant eaters. There's 1 million wildebeests and 500,000 zebras and all the other plant-eating mammals in Africa. And there are a lot of plant-eating insects in your yard, but very few predators if you do the count. So here we have one hungry lioness using the Range Rover as her blind. And one saying that hit home to me was, if you eliminate the predator, you inherit their job. Because insects are critical to the food web. We no longer say food chain as in linear, but food web, it's a network and plants and animals cross over. So leaves are low calorie density food. And if you eat lettuce with no peanut butter, you will lose weight. And if you add the peanut butter or cheese, you're going to add calories. So caterpillars are exquisite for converting this low-calorie food to soft, nutritious, protein-packed bundles for baby birds. So we have a lot of Western bluebirds around, and they are insectivores, and they need insects for their family. So you're supporting birds when you support insects. The problem with insecticides is it kills all the insects, the herbivores and the carnivores. The herbivores reproduce like that exponentially, and the carnivores typically reproduce much more slowly because they're fewer in number. And they stay fewer in number because they reproduce more slowly. So that's a little circular. So the rebound makes for too many herbivores, tempting one to respray, and you worsen the imbalance. And you really want to see a lot of these ladybugs. And you may not recognize a ladybug in her Halloween costume, which is the larval form. So UCANR stands for University of California Agriculture and Natural Resources, and they have a division of integrated pest management. And they're not too enthusiastic about purchasing ladybugs because they may not survive the packaging and fly away. So it's better to have an insect-friendly environment, and you may see these strange-looking miniature alligators in your yard, and they're actually baby ladybugs. So many insects have 4 life stages. The eggs, the larvae, the pupa, which in a butterfly would be called a chrysalis, and they can be gorgeous, and the adults getting fertilized to make new eggs. The eggs are generally glued on the food that that larvae is going to eat. So the mother, the fertilized female, flies around, figures out which plant is perfect for her offspring, and lays the eggs, and then can transform into an adult insect to start the cycle over again. So when I am at a hotel or at a environment where the leaves are absolutely perfect and there's no nibble marks, I get a little concerned that there's a lot of insecticides around because caterpillars nibble leaves and they get fed to birds. So the vegetables generally are organic and insecticide free, and many of the ornamentals are also at the Sloat Garden Centers, which is a really cool place to start your garden. So if you don't use insecticides, what do you do? And one solution is actually to invite more insects in. So you can add an insectary row. You'll see them in vineyards, and they're not just for eye candy. Every 5th row may be filled with wildflowers because some insects eat pollen, drink nectar, and eat bugs, or their larval form eats bugs. So there is an organization called Wild Farm Alliance out of Watsonville, and they actually track the presence of beneficial insects and insectivorous birds on crops, and to convince farmers that having actually more is better than trying to kill them all. And what is also interesting to me is that people got very enthusiastic about hybridizing and improving flowers for their own aesthetics. So they changed this native rose, 5 petals. You can see all the stamens, you can see the stigma, and you can access the pollen yourself with a paintbrush. And bred, not GMO, but just hybridizing to add the number of petals until the pollen's no longer accessible. So it doesn't work for the insects. So keep it simple and keep it basic for your insectary row. So does it really work, or are you shooting yourself in the foot? Well, some people, I hope, saw that delightful movie in 2018 called The Biggest Little Farm. And the person that was the advisor to these farming newbies was Alan York. And he advised a lot of farms on insectary areas. And in fact, the Benzinger vineyard actually took out grapevines and added a swath of hedgerows and an insectary garden to bring in predatory insects and reduce pest pressure in their garden, which is also pretty. So
And did it work?
yes, yeah. And there's data from Wild Farm Alliance if you want to look at actual numbers. So a pollinator garden is popular, but they generally support bees, butterflies, and hummingbirds. An insectary garden is more diverse in its insect support, And you're going to support things that aren't necessarily pollinators, like ladybugs and lacewings and beetles that run around the ground and can eat insects. So this is actually my garden some spring ago. Didn't complete the weeding by the time I took that picture, but that's how nature is. But a lot of plant cover, some of it perennial and some of it annual. So the annuals would work best in a planting bed that happens to be empty at the time, and the perennials are going to work best around the garden or in an orchard setting, or even if you have an orchard of 4 trees, you can have the perennials there because you're not digging it up and replanting it every single year. So you can have lots of flower cover, and you actually want that to span before and after your harvested vegetables. This is a Epilobium canem, California fuchsia, that flowers in the fall, which is just stunning. So, how do insects and plants interact? Well, you need them healthy enough to outgrow the nibblers. That's the first thing. Plants actually can beacon predatory insects to rescue them. If they feel like they're being nibbled, they will emit a volatile chemical to bring in the Air Force squad. And they can deter nibblers with toxic chemicals. These toxic chemicals may not seem so toxic to us, like caffeine. But it was invented by plants, not for our morning coffee, but as to reduce the pressure of insects. Anytime I see a praying mantis, this praying mantis was on the outside of a window. I stop and take a picture. I just love praying mantises. And you want to think about insects as being your free weeding friends. So a plant that is off limits to all insects is going to take over and be a weed. And everyone's most terrifying, many people's most terrifying weed is foxtails. If you have a dog, getting it in their ear or eye or whatever is pretty unpleasant. So you actually want to have that cycle of plants growing, getting nibbled by you or an insect or a bird, and then remixing it into soil and then a new plant growing. I don't want a plant that's off limit to all insects because then I have to pull it out. So the second strategy, besides an insectary garden and bringing more insects into your garden, is plant diversity. And it's chilling to read about the Irish potato famine that lasted for 7 years, which was complete crop failure of the potato crop. And in that little tiny island of Ireland of 6 million people, there was huge amount of starvation, and 1 million people immigrated from a population of 6 million. It changed the country. And potatoes were the main crop. They were not grown from seed. They were grown and reproduced vegetatively, meaning you take a potato and chop it up. So at least there's one eye on each segment of chopped up potato and plant that. So basically that's clones, they're all identical twins. So when Phytophthora came in, it wiped out the crop. Phytophthora is a word that is almost unpronounceable. You have to have a very soft tongue to say it. And if it's ringing a bell with some people, it is the same genus as sudden oak death. So it's sort of an algae-like thing, not quite a fungus, and has caused a lot of problems in monoculture and in cloned plants. So regenerative agriculture, again, thinking back to The Biggest Little Farm, says shake things up, mix things up. You have different plants side by side. You're going to get different insects visiting, and some of them will be predatory, meaning eating other insects. In the root zone, You're going to have shallow roots and deep roots. And roots not only hold together the soil to reduce erosion, but a root has squeezes out a exudate of sugar water, which supports all the insects and the bacteria and the fungi and the nematodes that are in the soil. So you have healthy polymicrobial soil. And you want to protect the surface with a mulch so it isn't all sunburned. I mean, even on a hot day, you feel more comfortable outside with a t-shirt on than not. And you want to not disturb the soil surface by digging or double digging, which is fine with me, because then you're going to break up the fungi and reduce that soil polymicrobial population. And if you have a friend with sheep or chickens, you can add some of their gifts.
Uh, I'm on mic. Joan, one of the things that we are really happy to be getting at the nurseries these days is biochar, which hasn't previously been available as a packaged material. But biochar is basically charcoal, which increases the basically the home spaces for bacteria and fungi in the soil. And the neat thing about it is you really only have to add it once and it lasts virtually forever, at least for a lifetime for a human, and can increase the quality of your soil along with organic matter that has to feed all that biodiversity that's in the soil. So we're pleased with that, and it's now available in relatively small packages. You don't have to buy the giant bag that nobody could probably use up. So
And
that's
also holds on to the trace elements, the minerals beyond NKP of the biochar because of the charges. So that's cool. So here we get into the geeky part, which is plant families. So when I was a kid, 3,000 years ago, we did play animal, vegetable, or mineral for 20 questions. But now there's lumpers and splitters, but the splitters have won. So there's domain, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. We're only going to talk about the last three, family, genus, species. And because you want to mix up your vegetable garden and not plant related plants next to each other. But how do you know what's related? If they're in the same plant family, they are related. So think back to evolution. I love this with dog evolution. Forget the experts. Domestication of the dog only took about 8 seconds. Cooked meat, wheels to chase, a fire to bask by. Fellows were done evolving. So when you split off because a bird flew from North America to Japan or Galapagos and became a different species, or you're on the north side of the Grand Canyon and the south side of the Grand Canyon and you don't talk to each other anymore, you get different species. But if you're relatively closely related, you're considered in the same plant family. And you can see plant families pretty clearly in your own grocery store. Although they may not look so different, it's really the flowers that can tip you off. So when you think about gourds, you may not instantly think that a cucumber and a pumpkin are related, but if you kind of think about the flat seeds, and if you filled in the pumpkin, you can kind of see a relationship. Onions would be more clear cut. I mean, onion, garlic, leek, you can guess that they're related. And same with peas and beans. But cabbages get smelly when you cook them, like broccoli or actual cabbage or cauliflower or arugula. But alyssum, sweet alyssum, that little bedding plant, which is very cute and very pretty, is in the cabbage family. So don't plant that next to your cabbages. You'll draw in bugs. But so this is just an overview of plant families that you don't want to plant next to each other. You want to break things up because you don't want related plants next to each other that one insect or one disease can wipe through. So the mint family is pretty easy to recognize. The stems are generally square. If you go in the grocery store and roll that stem of basil, you'll feel 4 edges. It has opposite leaves. They come out at the same point on the stem rather than alternate leaves. Opposite is less common. Alternate is more common. The leaves smell good. The flowers are tubular. And there are a lot of mint families, but we eat a subset of them: mint, basil, rosemary, sage, thyme, oregano, and chia seeds. Chias are mints. So the picture here is another mint called Lepicinia fragrans, fragrant pitcher sage, which has thumb-sized flowers, which are big flowers for mints, and smells like minted grapefruit peel. And I saw it yesterday at the Kentfield Sloat. There they are. They're gorgeous. Who would have suspected that lettuce is actually related to sunflowers? I mean, that's crazy. But if you let lettuce bolt and look at the flower, you can see that the structure is in the sunflower family. Sunflowers themselves make great companion plants. This is Delta sunflower, or maybe some sort of hybrid, because I planted a whole bunch of different sunflowers together, but I like the multi-stem sunflower rather than just the one flower too high for me. But they're great pollinators. They support parasitoids, which are little wasps that destroy other insects. And so here you get a companion plant and a food plant if you like sunflower seeds. The tomato family is a huge vegetable family, and Dan is an expert pepper grower and has given webinars on peppers. So tomatoes, eggplants, and all the peppers that you can name, even potatoes and goji berries. Goji berries are basically cherry tomatoes, which are super, super sweet, that are dried and sold as a, what is it? Miracle food or healthy food or something like that. Tomatillos and Peruvian ground cherry. If no one has tried a Peruvian ground cherry before, you will be amazed how delicious they are. So the flowers are gorgeous in the Solanaceae family, and they often require buzz pollination. Honeybees will not pollinate them. They need that big bumblebee that holds on to the flower and does buzz pollination or sonication. They hold their wings still, they shake their body, and the pollen comes out like a salt shaker with 2 small holes. So when I first learned about plant families, I'm like, oh, great, I'm going to have a planting bed just of Solanaceae. And that was the wrong thing to do. So now they're all spread out. Cabbage, we talked about that before. Arugula is a cabbage. When you eat it, you kind of get that little zip, and turnips and radishes. And the seeds for canola oil are in the cabbage family, and mustard. Mustard is a cabbage. You grind up the seeds and make that mustard spread. They have 4 petals, 6 stamen, 4 long, 2 short, and lots of food plants in the cabbage family. Don't clamp them together, spread them out. One may ask why there are 4 long stamens and 2 short stamens, and evolutionary, maybe that gene was next to an important gene, or maybe bees like, they're using the 6 stamens like a yoga rolling thing. Who knows? Not every observation has a why evolutionary that I know about, but you can recognize cabbage family plants. So cover crop and interplanting. So a cover crop is when there's no other crop and you're just filling an empty area, and interplanting is growing them together. It turns out that a fallow field does not rest the soil. It actually degrades the soil because you have no living plants with roots in the ground squishing out a root exudate that's feeding the beneficial microbes in the soil. They're all dead, and then you have to start from zero. So you want your garden largely covered with something.
Joan, I'd like to add a comment there because I I grow quite a few of my vegetable crops in containers, and I found that sometimes I'm not growing something in a container and it just sits there, and the soil dries out completely and bakes in the sun. And in that circumstance, my feeling and thought is, without any science, that probably that soil is losing its biological activity. And so I don't just stir it up and water it and replant it. I dump it out and mix new soil or a little manure or something that can inoculate it with fresh fungi and bacteria that have to grow in it so that I have better soil for my new crop in the container. And I think that makes sense with what you're saying here.
And not only are them you can count less microbes in the soil, and I'm saying microbes, but fungi, bacteria, nematodes, all that stuff in the soil. But the soil actually can become hydrophobic, afraid of water. It beads up on the surface and doesn't even get wet. You almost have to, soak it to break down that waxy coating. But there's plenty of cover crops that you can add some seeds on the off season and keep something alive in it.
Right.
But I think what you're doing is good, and keeping something alive in it is also good. But there are cover crop seeds at the garden centers, and a lot of them are for winter, the fava beans and the clovers, the vetch peas, and oats. And the annual buckwheat is a great summer cover crop. And so you can get a seed packet. I've grown fava beans for about 10 years, and what I've done is collect the beans when they're fully mature and ripe to replant, because I figure, well, they're the beans that survived my complete lack of care over the winter and like my garden. So I'm selecting stuff that likes my garden. And they are amazing. I mean, they'll be 6 inches high. I'll plant them in October. I provide absolutely no extra water, none. So they sit there until the first rain. And then I'll get this frost in December, and it will just be a completely white backyard. And those things just perk up the next day, and they're fine and continue growing. And now they're 3 feet tall. I eat, them in the early spring, and then wait for the later ones to mature completely to those shiny things that you could see in the seed store and the grocery store. But seed packets are going to be great for cover crops. Besides keeping the soil healthy, you can reduce weed pressure. One is by outnumbering them and just having a lot of your desired cover crop, because if it's an annual, it's going to be dead and not be a perennial weed. And some plants actually have negative allelopathy. So have you ever noticed, if you walk around, you see a eucalyptus tree and there's absolutely nothing growing underneath it? They drop their bark and their leaves, and there's a lot of chemicals in there that says, this is my plot of land and you are not growing here. So it turns out rye, just like rye bread, rye has negative allelopathy. Actually, the crimson clover is growing with it, but not everything, and will suppress weeds for 3 weeks after it's harvested. So if you do grow rye and chop it down in the spring and put in vegetables, you can start vegetables as little vegetable starch, because it will inhibit germination for 3 weeks. But you can use it to your advantage if you want to take over a new area and get rid of some of the awful weeds like foxtails. You can use a ton of mulch. You can go to a feed store and get an 80-pound bale of straw. It's not quite as good as growing the plants, because when you grow the plants, you do get the roots in the soil, but it's a good first step to get your garden going and make it easier to grow plants the next year. So bales are pretty large, and supposedly cover 2,000 square feet. I would put it thicker than that. I wouldn't get that much coverage, but You've got little ones. We've got the mini me straw at the garden centers, which are chopped so they could fit into, say, the top of your containers, Dan, and or in smaller areas of your garden, and you don't need to mess up your entire car for the rest of the season until you get it detailed.
Apparently, some of the wholesale growers are getting into this idea because some of the plants that we're receiving now at the nurseries are covered with some kind of little mulch, very
Oh,
fine, usually. Looks we got some Daphne in that looks very similar to that straw chopped. I'm not sure what the material is. And some of the maple trees that we've been getting down from Oregon have lots of nutshells in them used as a mulch on top of the soil. And that helps keep the weeds down, helps to retain moisture and keep the soil cool for the roots. So, go with the mulch in your containers. It's a great idea. You just don't want to use something that packs down or that can keep the water from penetrating evenly. So I have to go on my anti-coffee ground rant here. Do not use coffee grounds by themselves as a mulch because they pack together like cement. Always mix them with something else so that you can get the water and air to penetrate.
yeah, you don't want the water to sheet off. You want it to trickle through, the and retain. But you can, if you have a thermometer, like if you have a compost pile and you're checking the thermometer, you can put that in bare ground and in soil underneath mulch, and it's much cooler. I mean, those roots are not going to get cooked. Um, you also, besides not compacting it or using coffee grounds, you want to keep it away from the actual stem of the plant because the above ground part of the plant wants air. The below ground part can tolerate water because it's a root, but you don't want to have crown rot. So keep a little space around the base of the plant. Make friends with a farmer. This is my sheep. This is Spike. He's a Gotland sheep. He's for wool. He's not going to be lamb chops ever. But if you do live in an outside area or you do have a conversation with someone with the farm and get organic fertilizer, pasture mowing for big places, instant composting when those leaves and pumpkins get through their gut. And he loves scritches under the chin. It's a very, very friendly sheep. And we talked about mixing up plant families, not having things that are looking apparently different, but actually related, like potatoes and tomatoes and peppers in one planting bed, mixing those up. It's always, if we like to eat the plant, that means it's a delectable plant, low lignin. What do I mean by low lignin? Has anyone been astonished by the price of asparagus and they keep chopping and chopping and chopping and they go to the very bottom of the asparagus because they want to get their money's worth? And the bottom quarter of the asparagus you could use as dental floss. That's so strong and so stringy. That's lignin. Makes it almost inedible. Everyone else is going to like to eat it too. So a lot of plants that we grow in the garden are from across the world originated in different parts of the world. But we do have our native edibles, huckleberries, which are more delicious than blueberries, strawberries, blackberries, gooseberries, hazelnuts. I'm wondering if those shells on the maples are hazelnut shells, because there's a huge hazelnut industry in Oregon that are spectacular.
They look like hazelnuts.
Yeah, walnuts, all the sages that we talked about in the chia seeds. So I gave a reference for native edibles, and I have a Rogers red grape outside my front gate that's stretched along 30 feet of fence line and actually has seeded grapes, but they're really, really delicious. So I want to wish you happy gardening. This is one day's haul. And I think I just like the color combination, but they were all delicious anyway. So the goal is to reduce pest pressure, weed pressure, disease pressure, and improve soil structure, certainly pollination with more insects and aesthetics. And you do that by pest pressure, inviting insects in, let them battle it out. You don't want to take over their job. Weed pressure, cover crops and mulch. Should have added that. Disease pressure, mix it up. If you don't know what family a plant is in, you can put in tomato plant Wikipedia. Every Wikipedia entry that I've seen of a plant has a little table on the right-hand side, and it gives you all the family name, genus, and species. And so things that are unlikely cousins, like alyssum and cabbage, you can find that out, which is pretty fun. If you're a geek like me, you can learn more 5-syllable words. You can improve soil structure with live roots. That is instead of and better than double digging, triple digging, because they get down deeper and have root exudates. Improve pollination with old-fashioned open flowers. If you can see the pollen, a bee can see the pollen. And improve aesthetics, because healthy plants are pretty and diseased plants aren't. And I have references. The slides do appear with the talk. So people can have access through the Sloat website for the slides. Silent Spring was written in 1962. I was 8 years old. I didn't read it then. I read it recently, and it's a knockout book. Was, because she died 18 months after publication. So smart and so insightful. And it was eye-opening. The book I mentioned on the second slide was Plant Partners, which was very enjoyable, and some websites that gave some fun information on companion planting. So I can go for questions, Dan, if you accumulated some.
I do have a few, and thank you for that. And just to remind people, the recording, the video of this talk goes up on the website and the YouTube site on Tuesday. So if you want to go back and look at the slides again, or go back to the references on the last slide, you can quickly do that. One person, Sarah asks, what are good companion plants for roses that are being attacked by aphids and fungus?
So there was, so you basically want things that eat aphids, like ladybugs. And so having an insectary row with your roses are actually going to help, because you've got predatory mites, predatory lacewings. If it's pure roses, low growing, diverse plants that aren't in the rose family are going to increase the insect population. And there are these things called parasitoids, which are generally little stingless wasps. They are so tiny. They're as tiny as a comma on a printed page. And they fly around and they find the larval form of a lot of insects, introduce an egg with their ovipositor, and their larvae eats the problematic insect. So a lot of diversity. Fungus is more horticultural, meaning having wind through it. So if there's something blocking the wind, and having proper pruning so the inside is completely open, the classic vase pruning of a rose, which is done, I heard, before Valentine's Day, February 14th. Dan, do you want to take the fungus question? Because you're...
It's yeah, fungi on roses are a constant topic of conversation, and especially here in Mill Valley, which we call Mildew Valley. We also suffer from rust and black spot here. And if you're in an area where there are heavy loads of fungus, what we recommend is if it happens early in the season, just strip all the leaves off and let them grow out again. And roses have plenty of energy stored up in them that they can do that. Usually the fungus load is worse at the beginning of the season and gets better as the air gets drier later in the season. There are modern fungicides that are actually bacteria that both inhibit and kill the fungus and actually help the plant to resist. And they have names like Bonides Revitalize, and Monterey makes one called Complete Disease Control. And those can help if you've just got a really heavy infestation. But pruning, air, and luck on the weather are the biggies, and there's no real getting away from them in most of the Bay Area, because they're just ubiquitous. They float in the air, the spores land, and away they go. So again, it's not a matter of elimination. It's a matter of keeping the load low enough that the plant can continue to grow. Cleaning up carefully afterward, and dormant spraying is really critical. Copper dormant spray when there are no leaves on the plants during the winter is critical. And I'll give a shout out here for alyssum, which is a brassica.
Did you know that before?
I did. I learned that a couple of years ago before doing a webinar about cruciferous vegetables. I learned that they were cruciferous because they're in the form of a cross, the
Right.
flower, and that alyssum is a brassica. But alyssum has been shown to be one of the absolute best attractants of insects that eat other insects. And a lot of those are hoverflies, which look a little like a bee, and the hoverflies themselves eat nectar, but their larvae, a lot of the species, their larvae eat tons and tons, more aphids than ladybugs eat. So you want to encourage these little guys that look like bees, but they tend to just hover in one place a lot. And those are very good insects for your garden.
A
Uh,
lot of small white open flowers like yarrow and alyssum. Those are the ones that are attracting the insects that generally are the predators, or their larval form is the predator. As a general rule, that's what people have found. So if you like the white look, and you can plant a variety of them.
uh, uh, Respecting cover crops, can we chop the cover crop into the soil, or do we need to pull them out when we're ready to put the garden in?
So what I do is I actually chop them off at soil level. I don't pull them out because I like having roots in the ground. A live root in the ground, a root of a live plant, is giving that root exudates, that sugar water that's supporting the soil life. But a dead root does a lot of things. It adds organic material to the soil. It is eaten by the fungus, and then when it's gone, provides a channel for air and water. And it's just like you double digging or triple digging. It's getting organic material that's holds on to water and retains water down deep into the soil. So unless it's like a oxalis, it has little nubs that will resprout. An annual cover crop is basically dead. I chop it off at soil level. I leave it as a surface mulch without digging it in.
Mhm.
And because in the natural forest or in the natural scrub, you have the organic layer, twigs, leaves, petals, whatever, falling down on the ground and providing a mulch surface. And as you go deeper to the topsoil, they get incorporated into the soil with all the shredders, which are arthropods, insects and other arthropods that shred it up, and then the bacteria, fungus, and nematodes do further degeneration. So I leave it as a mulch and don't have to go buy that special straw from Sloat. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, maybe we'll have baled stalks of fava beans available that people.
Yeah. Oh, fava bean stalks. Yes. What you do when the fava bean, if you let them go all the way till today, till June, and they're dead, and you're collecting the fava beans, if you do break them off at soil level and put them in a pile, they are hollow and they provide a habitat for cavity nesting bees. We have 1,600 species, 1600 species of native bees, 30% cavity nesting, 70% ground nesting. And so they drill a hole and make a little bedroom for their little offspring, pollen, loaf, egg, and stuff like that. So they need hollow stems. So if you don't need to get a bee hotel, you can just put a pile of fava bean stems in a corner of your garden.
That's a great one. I like that. Let's see. Somebody asked about, Kathy asked about, it's got wild plants that used to have little red flowers, thin red flowers. The flowers are gone, and they've got a lot of hard, round seeds along the stalk. Sounds like it could be maybe some kind of millet. Um, Lots of them. Are
Are
they?
they are they little?
Well, it
Like
doesn't say. Are they sucking nutrients out of the ground? No, once they're dead, they're not sucking nutrients out of the ground. What I would wonder is whether you want all those little seeds to fall off and grow the next year or not. If you do, then I would just leave them. If you don't, I would try to get in the habit of chopping them off before the seeds mature so that you can put them in the compost rather than having them grow in the ground the next year and make another crop of the wild plants. But if you like them, I don't think it doesn't sound like they're going to be doing any harm to the next thing that you plant there.
It is really hard to identify really small plants. I mean, a bigger plant, you can take a picture and look on iNaturalist or Lens or Picture This and find the name of the plant. If they're really, really, really tiny and you don't have a macro lens, they're hard to identify. You need an expert to identify. There's a little weed called cardamine, not cardamom, which is a delicious spice, but cardamine, mine, that's a brassica. And I just leave it in the garden. They crack me up. I call it the spring plant. They have little tiny white flowers. The seed capsule, when the seeds are mature, springs open. It springs apart and twists and throws the seeds 3 feet in the air. Like if you're leaning down and pulling a weed and you get something tapping on your glasses, hopefully you're wearing glasses. It's just that is their mechanism of seed dispersal. And they're gone in March because they're, end of spring natural natives. But I've found some popping up some native plants that were in the seed bank. So I try to figure out what a plant is before I destroy it.
That's a great habit to get into. I tried to make an inventory of what I find growing in my in my garden and make sure that I point things out that have just popped up to the gardener who comes around to make sure that uh, they know that it's something I want to save. Um,
Yeah, I
and
found out about a new plant. You can take hikes to the naturalist and take a picture and then add text to the picture. You can write the name right on the picture right there when they're standing there. Because I didn't know about turkey mullein, which is an annual native, really beautiful sea green, light green leaves. And the seeds are so attractive to doves that the Miwoks used to collect the seeds, throw them on the ground, and have a bunch of doves come and eat them and throw a net over them and have dinner. But like I didn't know about that plant before. And now I've got it, I saw some popping up in my garden. I'm like, don't pull those. Yeah, that's a fun thing of a fun discovery.
Absolutely. Let's see. I missed one here. Where is it? Oh, somebody is having trouble with earwigs, pincher bugs, and roly-polies. What do we call those?
Oh, yeah. Isoporus, what are those guys?
There are many names for them, but um, in her greenhouse, eating
Mm.
seeds. Now, I'm surprised to hear roly-polies eating seeds. My understanding is they eat decomposed vegetation. I wouldn't be surprised if earwigs eat seeds because they'll eat fresh vegetation. Um,
Probably just germinated, just barely germinated little
maybe
guys.
yeah, seedlings. Um, the traditional way to get rid of earwigs is to roll up a newspaper, moisten it just a hair, put rubber band around it, and leave it out for them to hide in during the day because they're kind of light phobic and they come out at night to eat usually. And so they'll go hide in there and then you unroll it and dump them out into a bucket of soapy water. Uh, they are not native Californians or native North Americans even. So I never feel badly about getting rid of them. But I do have an affinity for the roly-polies. And I think probably you should try to figure out where they're hiding again during the day probably, and they're coming out at night, and maybe a little sweeping hygiene to get rid of their hiding places might work best for them. I'm not
Yeah,
sure.
I see a lot of commercial growers using metal mesh tables to put their plants on. Because if you put a pot on wood, the bottom of the pot and that wood is a perfect place for earwigs. I mean, that is their Ritz-Carlton hotel. And if you have an open bottom, it's just too airy and too light and too dry for them. So, when I see on my planning table, I'm going to get a metal, open metal planning table or use hog wire or expanded metal. There's a company called Farm Tech that has like commercial growing tables that are metal, but I think it's a wood. I see all the earwigs in a moist wood environment and
Mhm.
feed them
Yeah.
to my chickens. They love them.
They need moisture and darkness during the day. Uh, yeah. Um, is there a cheat sheet available with the plant family groupings? Oh boy, there must be a billion of them. That's an internet thing. I bet you can find it. Um, but it's a big group. And the higher you go up the ladder, well, I mean, the further you go down the ladder, the bigger the group gets, just like a family tree. So I wouldn't tend to go above the family level. And in terms of identifying, a lot of us get worried about the exact species this is and that sort of thing. Boy, I'm pretty happy usually if I can identify a plant to the family, that's good. If I can get genus, that's fantastic. And I tend not to worry too much about species because that's exactly where all the name makers argue, on the head of a pin about, is this a subspecies? Is this a little regional variation? Is this a blah, 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 blah?
Yeah,
So try to
I
make
mean,
it
there's what,
the family.
350,000 identified plant species, 350,000, 6,000 bird species, just, for the birders around, and 300 and something plant families. So plant families are huge, and there's not that many, 100 plant families represented in the native plants in California. But the, 5 or 6 that are growing in your garden, you know, you can get a gestalt like the mint family. I mean, you'd like, oh, that's a mint. And when you tell someone a basil's a mint, they're like, oh, that makes sense. I mean, it it's aromatic, it's not minty aromatic, but it has, it's just like lemongrass can smell citrusy, even though it's not a citrus. But you get a gestalt. So I think that one slide on grocery store families was really, really cute. But yeah,
That's a good place to start. And um, once you get a gestalt like of the mint family, you go square stem, opposite leaves, often aromatic. You can go a little further and start to recognize the shape of the flower, uh, and surprising things become part of the mint family for you suddenly, and you go, aha. And you can do that. The cruciferous vegetables, the brassicas are relatively easy to figure out. Um, some of the weird ones, like the amaranth, they're more difficult because you don't often see the flowers. So, it's a good thing to be curious about, but not to obsess about. And
well, like, oh, carrots and parsley are in the same family. And in Japan, they commonly use the greens of carrots as we use parsley, as a vegetable, or as you'd add parsley. So if you don't have any parsley in the house and you have carrot tops, just use that instead. And they're
there,
in the same family,
right.
Apiaceae.
Well, Joan, as usual, you have presented a great talk, and I want to thank everybody for being here today and through our season. If any of you were at my potato talk, I want to report that the potatoes in the big 15-gallon can grew wonderfully. They were banana potatoes, which is a small
Mm.
yellow potato. And all of us here at the nursery took some home and fried them up for breakfast, and they were delicious. And the other day, I dumped out the garbage bag that I grew the French red fingerlings in, just in order to show people how easy potatoes are to grow. I planted them in a 13-gallon kitchen garbage bag, and they turned out great. There were a whole bunch of them, and so that experiment worked fine as well. So grow some potatoes next year, get some certified disease-free seed potatoes so we don't recreate the Irish potato famine, and go for it because they're super easy.